Welcome to Gospel Tangents, the best source for Mormon history, science, and theology. I am Rick Bennett. Joseph Smith spent about 6 months in Liberty Jail following the Mormon-Missouri War of 1838. In our next conversation with historian Steve LeSueur, we'll talk about the court hearing and Joseph's escape from jail. Or was he let go by the sheriff? We'll find out more about that in our next conversation. You won't want to miss it. Check it out. So this is where Joseph spends, 6 months in Liberty Jail or so before
I think that's about it, yeah.
he escapes / was let go.
Yeah, and that is, it appears that he was let go by the sheriff after, so he's in jail because at the Richmond preliminary hearing, he and about 63 Mormons, I think it is, were tried for various crimes committed during the war. And here again is an example of the winner, they're in a conflict like this, there's winners and losers, and whoever wins puts the losers on trial for the crimes that, were committed. And in this case, the Mormons lost, so they were put on, that it was thought they were the aggressors. Yeah, they're put on trial, and Joseph and some others are put in jail for treason. Now, let me mention here that that the Richmond Court of Inquiry occurred, after Lucas finally surrenders the prisoners. He doesn't kill them, and Boggs, Boggs is adamant, that hey, turn them over to the civil authorities if they, committed crimes. And so it's called the Richmond Court of Inquiry. And for much of our history, Mormon history, we have derided this as a mock trial, a mock hearing where the Mormons weren't allowed to bring defense witnesses, and the people who testified all lied, either, on purpose, or they were, Missourians who lied, or dissenters who lied because they were bitter, or Mormons who were forced at the point of Annette to lie. And thus, and the things what they lied about was that there was burning and plundering, etc. This was a mock trial. Well, this was not a trial, it was a preliminary hearing. And the purpose of a preliminary hearing is just to see if there's probable cause to believe that the defendants may have committed the crimes. And if so, then you bind them over, for an actual trial. And so that's all this was. And so there was plenty of evidence, people testifying that, yes, I saw Joseph do this. Yes, I saw Joseph do that. Or yes, I saw this person at the Battle of Crooked River. And so that was sufficient to say, oh, okay, if, for example, if you were at the Battle of Crooked River, then, one of the soldiers, then you were part of this group that murdered a person at the, a state militiaman. And likewise, if you were at Gallatin while the town was being burned and plundered, or I saw you there, that's enough. The Mormons' defense, if they were to mount a defense, would have been something effective. Yes, I was there. I was protecting myself. Yes, I did this. It was because I was being attacked, or we thought we were going to be attacked. And so these are legitimate defenses, but you don't put on that defense at a preliminary hearing. Because in fact, if you were to say that at a preliminary hearing, the judge would say, oh, okay, so you were there and you did shoot, or, you did do whatever. Okay, that's up for a jury to figure out, were you justified or not. So the Mormons did actually bring 7 people who testified, and they testified to very specific things like, no, he didn't have a clock, or I heard Samson Abard say he would lie. 3 people testified that Lyman White never left his house at Adam-on-Diamond, which is really rather strange because he did leave his house at Adam-on-Diamond, but they testified that he did not. And Lyman White initially swore that he never left his house, though in a later testimony he said he did. But in any case, so this Richmond hearing, it's kind of been misunderstood. It was just a preliminary hearing to find out if there was probable cause to bind the defendants over. And so based on you can read the testimony. Based on my reading of the testimony, the judge committed the Mormon defendants according to the testimony that was against them. And so as it turned out, he released, I think, 29 of them. So almost half just got released saying, nope, no evidence. And then five of them who were had probable cause for treason, which included Joseph, they were not allowed to post bail. And those who were involved in the Crooked River battle were not allowed to post bail because there was a murder involved. So anyway, that backed up to then. So Joseph, that's why Joseph was in Liberty Jail, was because of the testimony of him saying, he was prepared to march against the state, that he didn't care if state troops, that came against him, that all the militia was a mob, etc. This was interpreted as possible treason. So he goes to Liberty Jail. Then he and fellow prisoners are taken up to Gallatin for a trial, a grand jury hearing, essentially, again, more just like a preliminary hearing, and they get a change of venue to a different county. And so it was while they were being transferred that the sheriff in Davies apparently let them go. And some people there's some testimony of people who said, oh yeah, they saw that sheriff up in later in Nauvoo collecting his bribe. And so a question has been, well, did some people have argued, yeah, the whole state was in on letting him go. They just wanted to let Joseph go, and they saw that they had really messed up and just wanted to be done with the Mormons. Whether that's true or not, I don't know, because when the sheriff came back to Gallatin, he apparently was ridden out of town tarred and feathered and ridden out of town on a rail, because they didn't like the fact that he had let Joseph get away. And then later, Missouri did try and extradite Joseph and Lyman White and some others.
So you think the sheriff went against the state government in letting Joseph go?
I don't know. I haven't found any evidence that anybody in the state said, yeah, let him go. It's been more of our surmise that, yeah, they probably were glad to be rid of him. And sorry for, because it made the state look bad. And I don't think, and I think that that's a legitimate interpretation, though I could also just interpret it as this guy let him go. And as far as the state was concerned, it wasn't worth the trouble to try and go get him, for for those reasons is it just makes us look bad. But they didn't let other prisoners go that were in Boone, I think it was Boone County, that were on trial for murder, though at least one of them escaped. Parley P. Pratt escaped, and another guy, Luman Gibbs, was let off for lack of evidence, and so was a third person as well. So as it turns out, no Mormons were ever convicted of crimes during the war, which I would say is fair, even though they were, in some sense, they were guilty of certain crimes, you could argue. But on the other hand, so were many, many non-Mormons who were never even brought to trial. It was just assumed what they did was necessary and justified because of the Mormons' aggression.
So like with the death of David Patton, I guess the state troops are just claiming, well, self-defense, and that's sorry David died. But
yeah, because he attacked us.
Right. Okay. So there was a movie back in, I believe it was 2019, called Out of Liberty. Did you by chance see that? I know it was here in Utah, but...
I'm sorry, I did not.
Yeah. Because I'm trying to remember, I think it was the John Whitmer Historical Association. I had just seen it. So I think it was like September of 2019. It was right before COVID hit. And Alex Baugh, I was surprised because I thought the movie was a little bit slow, but pretty accurate. And Alex took a lot of issues with it. I wish you could have seen it because it kind of talks about this whole issue. But in the movie, one of the things, since you brought up the bribe, and I know Alex Baugh said something to the effect of, well, we're going to drink some grog. And then Joseph told the sheriff, hey, well, I'll pay you for these horses that we're stealing. Because, essentially, the sheriff gave him one or two horses. I don't remember how many. Well, probably two, because there were 4 or 5 prisoners.
Yeah, I think 5.
Joseph, Lyman White, Sidney, I think, got released for bad health or something.
Yeah. Caleb Baldwin and
Okay.
Alexander McCrae.
Oh, I don't remember them.
Yeah.
Okay. So they would have probably needed 2 horses to get away anyway, right? So we probably took a couple of horses. So, and Joseph in the movie gave his word that he would pay back the sheriff for the horses that he quote unquote stole. So is that kind of the story around the bribe? Do you think that Joseph was just repaying a debt and some people saw that as a bribe, or?
I guess so. That is news to me. So in other words, is Alex arguing then it wasn't a bribe?
Well, Alex didn't go into the bribe so much, but he did in the movie. The sheriff's walking him out and he's like, hey, I'm going to go drink some grog. And I know Alex mentioned drink some grog was like exactly what they said. Like, we're going to get drunk, take our horses. And Joseph said, I will pay you back for the horses. I mean, that's how Alex, I never heard the word bribe until you mentioned it. So that's the way Alex described what happened with the sheriff. But I can see how others would have interpreted that as a bribe.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and I will say I don't recall enough about those details to say one way or the other.
Okay, so because I could see how Joseph's like, I'm repaying a debt, and other people would say, well, that's a bribe. So for letting us go or whatever, but yeah.
And so I suppose then if he did just let him go without a bribe, so to speak, then that plays to the idea that, well, the state of Missouri told him, or somebody told him to do that. As opposed to, no, he did it because he got bribed. But in any case, that there were actually two men who were involved, or 2 Daviess County lawmen. One of them signed an affidavit, asserting that the prisoners made their escape without the connivance, consent, or negligence of myself or said guard.
What else are you going to say?
But according to Joseph McGee, one of the Daviess County citizens, he said that the enraged settlers rode Sheriff Morgan through town on an iron bar, and they dragged William Bowman by his hair across the town square. So I got that wrong about the tar and feathering. It was one of them got to ride the iron rail, and the other was pulled by his hair across the. So they were not happy.
The more I hear about Missouri justice, there was another story I'm trying to remember. Was it Alex Baugh? I think Alex Baugh told me. This is back in 1832 in Jackson County, or maybe even before that. They were divvying up the land, and the people told a judge that if he interfered with the land auction, that they were going to throw him in jail. At least until the auction was over. And it just seems like Missouri, is it fair to say Missouri especially was a very lawless place, and that law enforcement wasn't strong anywhere in the state, or at least where the Mormons were, for sure?
Well, I'd say in the western part of the state,
okay,
because in the eastern part you have St. Louis, though sure it had its issues, but yeah, that back then, yeah, that it was at the edge. It was at the edge of the United States. The territory to the west was Indian territory.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, on the escape, when they, whether it was, whether they were allowed to go or escaped or whatever, that there were 5 prisoners, and Hiram Smith was in there as well. Was one of them.
Oh, okay.
So anyway, so they traveled on, they traveled on out of the way roads, and so they wouldn't be recognized and seen, and they also traveled under assumed names, and they told people as they went east that they were land seekers, or as they went towards Nauvoo. Excuse me, they said they were land seekers from the east, sort of inspecting lands. And we get this story from Orange White, Lyman White's son, and he says, so they
Orange, like the fruit. His name was Orange.
Yes,
Wow.
yeah,
That's interesting.
yeah. So they're traveling under assumed names. So and then they stayed at farms, stayed with different people as they went along. So at one farm where they were staying, in the early morning, 4 of them went out for a little stroll, and they left Alexander McCrae behind. And so the farmer came out, and he told McCrae, he says, "I'm sorry." He says, "I've forgotten your name. What's your name again?" And McCrae had forgotten what his fictitious name was as well. And so he didn't know how to answer him. And so in order to stall, he just started coughing violently and pretended he had a terrible stomach cramp and he had spasms, and it was, so he rendered him unable to speak. And he kept this up until the 4 others came back. And the alarm farmer, he ran outside and got the others and called them, "Come on back. And so they ran in, and the others ran in, and they said, "Oh, Mr. Brown, what's wrong? What's wrong with you?" And so then he knew his name was, Brown. And so the relieved Mr. Brown, he began to recover right away. But in the meantime, the farmer went, he got a jug of whiskey, and he said, he recommended it from what was ailing Mr. Brown. So they all took us, and so he gave some to Mr. Brown, McCrae, and then they all took a swig just in case it was contagious. And so so then as they eventually they all made it back to Quincy, but he says that after they got back, he says that when any of them was ever offered like a beer or any other alcohol stimulant, they would all say, give some to Brother McCrae first. He has a cramp and he can't tell his name."
That's a great story. Oh, all right. I hope you enjoyed our conversation with historian Steve LeSueur. Our next conversation with Steve is going to be our last, and so you need to sign up to our free newsletter at gospeltangents.com/newsletter so I can send you a secret link to the final part of our conversation. I'm going to ask Stephen if Governor Boggs was a good governor. You said in your book, by the end of his term, nobody liked him. He wasn't a very good governor. Was he a pretty terrible governor? Would a different person have handled that better?
I'd say a different person probably couldn't have handled it worse. So
if you'd like to hear the entire interview uncut, please subscribe to patreon.com/gospeltangents for just $5 a month. Patreon is spelled patreon.com/gospeltangents. If you'd like to watch the entire video, you can subscribe at YouTube, Patreon, or on my website at gospeltangents.com and click the yellow subscribe button for just $8 a month. PDF transcripts are just $10 a month, and you can get those on patreon.com/gospeltangents or on my website. I'll send those to you as soon as I've finished completing it. If you'd like to get a paperback and PDF, just subscribe for $20 a month at either Patreon or on my website. Individual paperbacks are available at Amazon.com. Just do a search for Gospel Tangents Interview, and you can find all of our past interviews there. Show your Gospel Tangents pride by purchasing a t-shirt on our website at gospeltangents.com/shop. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts at tinyurl.com/gospeltangents. You can get our latest updates by friending me at Facebook, or you can also follow our page at facebook.com/gospeltangents. Become an insider and you can see the newest videos. Follow us on Twitter at Gospel Tangents. Click here to subscribe, here for a transcript, and over here we've got some of our great videos. Thanks again.